You think you're free, but you're not. You wake up when you're told, work where you're told, spend what you're told, and you call it life, the truth. You were never meant to escape the cycle. You were trained to stay in if the bars aren't made of steel, they're made of debt, fear, and distraction. And the scariest part, most people will spend their entire lives defending the prison that's killing them. You were born into a world that promised you freedom. It's printed on your passports, engraved in national anthems, and sold to you in commercials with smiling faces driving convertibles down coastal highways. But the version you received is not the one you were promised. The freedom you know is a packaged product, marketable and hollow from the day you took your first breath. The rules of your life were already written. They told you that freedom meant choice, what to wear, what to eat, what to watch, but choice without power is an illusion. You can choose from 1,000 brands of shoes, but you cannot choose to live without paying rent. You can decide between 100 streaming services, but you cannot decide to stop paying taxes. The boundaries of your life were set long before you could walk, and within those invisible walls, you are told you are free. History has a way of repeating itself, but it never repeats in the same costume. Centuries ago, the peasant bowed to the feudal lord. The currency was grain, and the price of protection was loyalty and labor. Today, you bow to your employer, your landlord, your lender. The currency is digital, and the price of survival is the same. Loyalty and labor. What has changed is the packaging. The feudal chains were visible. The modern chains are wrapped in comfort, convenience, and distraction. Think about it. Most people will spend the majority of their waking lives exchanging time for money, not because they want to, but because they must. This is not a personal failure. It is the system working exactly as it was designed. The average person will work 40 to 60 hours a week for 50 years, and at the end of it, will still need a pension or government assistance just to survive. This is not freedom. It is a lifelong lease on your own existence. The genius of the modern system is that it makes you believe you chose this life. You are told to follow your dreams, but only if your dreams can pay the bills. You are encouraged to be yourself, but only in ways that can be monetized. Even rebellion is sold back to you as a product. Your anti-establishment t-shirt is owned by the same corporation that owns the brand you think you're protesting. This illusion of freedom works because it's not enforced with whips or chains. It's enforced with incentives and fears. You're rewarded for compliance with small luxuries, weekend trips, new gadgets, subscription boxes. You're punished for defiance with late fees, eviction notices, credit score damage instead of a prison cell. You are given a mortgage instead of a guard. You are given a boss. Ask yourself, if you were truly free, why does every step toward independence come with a price? Why does living without debt feel impossible? Why are you constantly running, not toward something, but away from the fear of losing everything? The system thrives on this quiet desperation. It doesn't need to chase you. It only needs to keep you chasing. The same psychological tactics have been used throughout history, only adapted to the technology of the era. In ancient times, rulers used religion to declare that your place in life was the will of the gods. In the industrial age, they used nationalism to convince you that your sacrifice was for the glory of the nation. Today, they use consumerism to make you believe that happiness is just one more purchase away. The story changes, the control remains. This is the uncomfortable truth. The majority of your struggles are not the result of your own inadequacies, but of a system engineered to keep you in a perpetual state of controlled insufficiency. You are allowed just enough to stay alive, and just desperate enough to stay obedient. The beauty of this design is that it turns your cage into a mirror. When you fail to escape, you blame yourself. If you think you are immune, look closer. Even those who rise to financial success often find themselves chained by different forces: fear of losing status, pressure to maintain an image, dependence on markets they cannot control. The system does not simply target the poor. It engulfs everyone, adjusting the type of chain to the size of the wallet. Freedom, in its purest form, means the ability to live on your own terms without coercion. It is not given. It is taken, and taking it requires first recognizing the architecture of the cage. You cannot break free from something you refuse to seethe. Modern skyline is a monument to this illusion. Towers of glass and steel rise above the streets, each window reflecting a life spent working inside to afford the life outside. Millions rush through subway stations and crowded sidewalks, all believing they are chasing their own ambitions, when in reality they are running the same track, in the same wheel, toward the same endpoint. They call this progress, they call this freedom, but ask yourself, freedom must be bought, if survival must be rented, if the price of peace is perpetual labor, was it ever freedom at all? And, if not, then whose freedom are we really living? The most effective chains are the ones you never see. The modern world has mastered the art of building them not from iron, but from numbers on a screen, contracts you can't refuse, and promises that seem too reasonable to question. Dependency is not an accident of the system. It is the foundation of it. The economy doesn't thrive when you are free, it thrives when you are tethered, and so, from the moment you take your first step into adulthood, the system begins weaving an invisible web designed to keep you close, compliant, and always coming back. Consider the way you earn your living for centuries. Wages have been calibrated not to enrich the worker, but to keep them needing more in the industrial age. Factory owners learned that paying just enough to survive, never enough to truly prosper, kept workers tied to their machines. The formula hasn't changed. Whether it's a factory floor or a tech company office, most salaries are strategically matched to the cost of living, ensuring that even those who make it can't afford to walk away. The brilliance of this system is that it doesn't need to threaten you to keep you in place. It simply ensures that the moment you stop working, the ground beneath you disappears without a paycheck. Rent is due without rent. The roof over your head vanishes without that roof. The rest of your life collapses. The system doesn't need to force your hand, it lets the fear of falling do the work. Debt is the perfect leash. Unlike physical chains, it doesn't stop you from moving. It just makes sure you never stop moving in the direction they want. The invention of consumer credit transformed dependency from a temporary necessity into a permanent condition. Once upon a time, debt was shameful. Now, it's a rite of passage. Student loans, car payments, credit cards, these aren't signs of failure. They're milestones. You graduate with debt. You marry with debt. You retire with debt. The system has made debt so normal that living without it feels unnatural. Inflation is another silent weapon. The cost of living rises. Wages stagnate, and you are left chasing a moving target every year. The value of your labor buys you less, and yet you're told to work harder, save more, invest smarter. You're made to believe that if you can't keep up, it's because you lack discipline, not because the rules of the game are rigged against you. History shows us that dependency has always been a tool of control. In feudal Europe, peasants were free in name but tied to the land, paying rent to lords in the form of crops and labor. In colonial economies, workers were paid in company-issued currency that could only be spent at the company's store, a closed loop designed to keep wealth from ever leaving the hands of the owner. Today, the loop is bigger, but it's the same. Your paycheck leaves your hands and goes to banks, landlords, corporations, and governments before you can decide what to do with it. We are taught to admire those who have made it, but even success is often just a higher tier of dependence. The corporate executive with a 7-figure salary is chained to quarterly reports, stockholder demands, and market swings he cannot control. The small business owner depends on credit lines, supply chains, and a customer base trained to expect constant growth. The wealthy are not exempt from dependence. They simply depend on larger, more complex systems. Dependency is reinforced through culture, media, and advertising, condition us to see reliance as safety. You're told that renting is better than owning because maintenance is covered. You're told that a steady job is better than uncertain freedom because benefits are included. The very word independent has been rebranded to mean reckless, unstable, or irresponsible. The subtext is clear. You can't survive without Usavon. The safety nets are built to keep you tethered. Welfare programs, unemployment benefits, and public assistance are often structured in ways that discourage true independence. Earn too much, and you lose them. Earn too little, and you can't escape them. The system doesn't want you to fall. But it doesn't want you to climb out. Either it wants you balanced perfectly between survival and desperation. This is the genius of manufactured dependency. It doesn't just limit your options. It shapes your desires when you are trained to believe that stability comes from an employer, that comfort comes from consumer goods, that safety comes from credit. You stop seeking freedom, you start seeking better terms for your captivity, a higher salary, a lower interest rate, a nicer apartment. These become the victories you chase. All within the same cage, and here lies the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't need to hide what it's doing. The rules are printed in plain sight in loan agreements, tax codes, and employment contracts. But the language is so dense, the culture so loud, that you never stop to read the fine print, and if you do, you tell yourself it's the price of living in a modern world. The architects of this design understand something simple. People will accept almost any limitation as long as they feel they have chosen it. You think you chose your mortgage, your job, your car payment, but what you really chose was between one chain and another breaking. Free from this dependency begins with recognizing its architecture, the rent that keeps you working, the debt that keeps you compliant, the inflation that keeps you running, the culture that keeps you grateful for the privilege of your own servitude. Once you see it, you can no longer unsee it, but awareness is dangerous not to you, but to the system, because the moment you realize the leash is there, you start pulling, and the more you pull, the weaker its hold becomes. This is why they keep you busy, distracted, exhausted, not so you can't see the chains, but so you never have the energy to break them. And if dependence is the cage, then the next step is to understand how we were trained to build it ourselves. That training begins earlier than you think, long before you signed your first loan agreement, before you clocked into your first job, before you even understood the concept of money. The system began shaping you. It started in a brightly colored classroom, with a bell that told you when to speak, when to move, and when to stop thinking for yourself. We are taught to believe that education is the path to freedom, that if we work hard, get good grades, and earn a degree, the world will open its gates. But for most, those gates lead not to liberation, but to another kind of captivity, one that is so normalized, we call it successor. Modern school system is not designed to produce independent thinkers. It is designed to produce compliant workers. Its origins can be traced to the Prussian education model of the 18th century, a system built not to nurture creativity, but to instill obedience. The Prussian government needed citizens who would follow orders without question, whether on the battlefield or in the factory, and so they built schools to teach punctuality, hierarchy, repetition, and conformative values that translate seamlessly into the corporate world. Look at the structure of a typical school day. You sit in rows, facing an authority figure. You raise your hand for permission to speak. You move from subject to subject at the sound of a bell. You memorize information, repeat it on command, and then forget it once it's no longer needed. This is not education. It's conditioning for a life where you will wake to an alarm, answer to a boss, and follow rules you didn't write. Creativity, curiosity, and independent thought are treated as distractions, not strengths. A child who questions too much is labeled disruptive. A student who thinks differently is told they're wrong, not because their idea lacks merit, but because it doesn't fit the answer key. By the time you graduate, you have been trained to value approval over originality, compliance over courage. Then comes the next trap: student debt. In a cruel twist, the very system that claims to be your ticket to freedom demands payment before you can even begin your journey. Student loans are sold as an investment in your future, but they function as shackles that bind you for decades. You enter the workforce already owing money, and because your degree was marketed as essential, you believe the debt is normal, inevitable. Even this debt does more than drain your bank account. It limits your choices. You may want to travel, start a business, or take risks in pursuit of your passions. But with monthly payments looming over you, you choose stability over exploration, and stability, in the language of the system, means servitude. Ivan, for those who avoid debt, The education trap still works. You graduate into a society where employers value credentials over skills, where the piece of paper matters more than the person holding it. This creates a hierarchy that keeps you climbing for validation. Another degree, another certification, another reason to believe you're not ready yet. Meanwhile, the system profits from your perpetual state of preparation. It's important to understand that this is not an accident. The alignment between the education system and the economic system is deliberate. Schools prepare you to fill roles in industries that thrive on your obedience. They teach you to follow established paths, not to create your own, and because the process is wrapped in the language of opportunity, most people never see the bars of the cage they are building. The cultural narrative reinforces the trap. Movies, TV shows, and social media glorify the struggle of student life and the eventual reward of a steady job, as if this is the natural order of things. Questioning it makes you sound ungrateful or unrealistic, and so, generation after generation walks the same path, believing it leads somewhere different, only to arrive at the same destination: a lifetime of controlled freedom. The irony is that true education, the kind that fosters self-reliance and critical thinking, is easier to access now than ever before. The internet holds more knowledge than all the world's universities combined, yet most people use it not to free themselves, but to reinforce the same narratives they were taught in school. The system doesn't fear information. It fears independent interpretation. By the time you reach adulthood, the lesson is complete. You believe that success comes from pleasing authority, that risk is dangerous, that debt is normal, and that your worth is measured by the titles you earn. You've been prepared not for freedom, but for a lifetime of acceptable dependence. The education trap is effective because it doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like progress. You get the diploma, the handshake, the congratulations. You post the pictures online, everyone applauds, and then, quietly, you begin the next phase of your training. The one where you spend the rest of your life paying for the privilege of having been trained. But education, in its purest form, should not be about fitting into the world as it is. It should be about equipping you to question it, reshape it, and, if necessary, walk away from it entirely. That kind of education won't be handed to you. You will have to seek it, fight for it, and sometimes unlearn everything you thought you knew. The system doesn't want you to realize this, because the moment you do, the next chain, the one inside your own mind, begins to break. And once that happens, you start to see that poverty is not always about empty pockets. Sometimes it's about a mind conditioned to believe there's no way out. Poverty is not just a lack of money, it is a mindset, a carefully cultivated psychological state that ensures those at the bottom stay there. And perhaps the most disturbing truth is this: you don't have to be homeless to live in poverty. You can have a job, a car, even a mortgage, and still be trapped in a mental cage that prevents you from ever truly escaping. This is where the system's most sophisticated weapon comes into play. Not force, not law, but belief. If you can be made to believe that your circumstances are permanent, that the struggle is normal, then you will not rebel, you will adapt, you will internalize the rules of the game, even if the game is rigged against you. Psychologists have a name for this: learned helplessness. In a famous experiment, researchers placed dogs in a box with an electrified floor. At first, the animals tried to escape, but after repeated shocks with no way out, they eventually stopped trying. Even when the scientists opened a door to freedom, the dogs lay down and accepted their fate. They had been taught through experience that nothing they did mattered. This is how poverty works on the human mind. When you grow up watching your parents struggle, when every paycheck evaporates before the month ends, when every attempt to get ahead is met with another setback over time, your brain begins to accept struggle as the default state of life. You stop believing in exits, even if one is right in front of you. But this isn't just about financial struggle. The psychology of poverty seeps into every part of life. You think small because you're told that aiming too high is unrealistic. You delay dreams indefinitely because there's never a good time. You tolerate toxic jobs, relationships, and environments because you've been trained to believe that survival is enough. The system reinforces this mindset through what I call manufactured scarcity. The constant illusion that there isn't enough to go around, enough money, enough jobs, enough resources. This scarcity mentality keeps people competing with each other instead of questioning the system that keeps them scrambling. If you're too busy fighting for crumbs, you won't notice the feast being held behind closed doors. Advertising and media play a subtle but powerful role in this psychological warfare. They dangle images of luxury lifestyles and tell you that happiness is only a purchase away, but the products are always just out of reach, always requiring a little more money, a little more work, a little more sacrifice, and so you chase, but never arrive. This constant chase keeps you exhausted, distracted, and dependent on the very institutions. Profiting from your struggle debt is the perfect example. It's sold as a tool, something that allows you to have now and pay later, but in practice, it keeps you psychologically tethered to the system. You are less likely to take risks, start a business, or change careers when a mountain of debt looms over you. The fear of losing your income becomes a leash around your neck, and that leash can be pulled at any time. Even language plays a role. Think about the phrase low-income individual. It doesn't just describe a financial state. It becomes an identity. Once you internalize that identity, you unconsciously limit yourself to the expectations that come with it. This is why the wealthy teach their children about investment, ownership, and creation, while the poor are taught about budgeting, saving, and making do. The lessons are different because the intended outcomes are different, and yet the cruelest part is that people trapped in the psychology of poverty often police themselves. They talk each other out of opportunities. They shame those who try to break free. They call ambition, greed, and independence selfishness. This is not because they are bad people, because their worldview has been shaped by generations of survival thinking. When you live in a cage long enough, freedom starts to look dangerous. Breaking out of this mental trap requires more than just money. In fact, if you drop a large sum into the hands of someone still mentally conditioned by poverty, it will almost always disappear. That's why lottery winners often return to their previous financial state within a few years without a shift in thinking. The system's psychological grip remains intact. True escape begins with awareness, recognizing the patterns, questioning the assumptions, and refusing to let circumstance define identity. It means rejecting the narrative that you are powerless, that the game is fixed beyond change, and most of all, it means understanding that the real prison is not built of concrete or iron. It's built inside your own head. Because here's the truth, the system doesn't want you to know. Wealth is not just about accumulation. It's about autonomy. It's about having the power to say no, to walk away, to choose differently. That kind of wealth begins in the mind, long before it appears in the bank account. Once enough people break free from the psychology of poverty, the system itself begins to crumble. Because a population that knows it's not helpless is a population that can no longer be controlled. Why the fight for your freedom is not just a fight for money, it's a fight for your mind. And the first battle is knowing that you've been in a war all along. Dependency is not an accident, it's a business model. The most profitable companies on earth do not simply sell you products or services. They sell you the feeling that you cannot live without them. And once you've accepted that premise, they own you, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, and even physically. It begins innocently enough. You buy a phone you sign up for, a subscription, you take a job, but behind the polished branding and smiling customer service lies a carefully engineered system designed to keep you coming back, month after month, year after year, not because you want to, but because you have to. The corporate world learned early that the most valuable customer is not the one who spends the most money at once, it's the one who spends steadily, predictably, forever. This is why companies have shifted from selling products outright to locking you into recurring payments. You don't own the software, you rent it. You don't buy the music, you stream it. Even your car can now come with a subscription for heated seats. Same principle applies to employment. Corporations design jobs that cover just enough of your needs to keep you dependent, but never enough to make you truly free. If your salary allows you to survive, but not save, you will never have the resources to leave. You will keep showing up, not out of loyalty, but out of necessity, and that necessity is the golden chain strong enough to hold you, light enough to make you forget it's there. This dependency cycle is reinforced by another powerful force. Debt companies and banks work hand in hand to keep you in a constant state of owing credit cards, student loans, car payments, mortgages, all normalized as part of adult life, but every dollar you owe is a decision you no longer get to make freely. Debt determines where you work, how long you work, and what risks you can take. It keeps you bound to the very system that sold you the debt in the first place. Think about how corporations handle healthcare in many countries. By tying medical benefits to employment, they ensure that leaving your job isn't just a financial risk, it's a threat to your very survival. This is not generosity, it's leverage. As long as your well-being depends on your employer, you will remain compliant. Technology has taken this dependency to unprecedented levels. The devices in your pocket are not just tools. They are lifelines, gateways to work, communication, and entertainment, and the corporations behind them have made sure that you can't easily function without them. Miss a payment, and your service is cut off. Update your software, and suddenly, older devices no longer work as well, nudging you toward a new purchase. Every step is calculated. Every inconvenience. Deliberate dependency is also emotional. Corporations craft brands that feel like identities. You're not just buying shoes, you're joining a movement. You're not just drinking coffee, you're part of a community. The more you associate your self-worth with a brand, the harder it becomes to imagine life without it. This is why companies invest billions in advertising, not to convince you of a product's quality, but to convince you of your own inadequacy without it. But perhaps the most insidious form of dependency is time control. When your schedule is dictated by your employer, when your mental bandwidth is consumed by work and commuting, you have little left to invest in yourself. This keeps you from building skills, starting side ventures, or exploring alternatives that might threaten the corporate structure. The system isn't just buying your labor, it's buying your future. And here's the real twist. Corporations don't even need to maximize your happiness. In fact, they benefit from keeping you slightly dissatisfied. If you were truly fulfilled, you might stop buying, stop upgrading, stop chasing the subtle dissatisfaction. Whether it's in your lifestyle, your job, or your social status, keeps you spending, keeps you working, keeps you dependent. The dependency cycle is self-perpetuating. You work for a paycheck to pay for products and services you've been convinced you need, which in turn require you to keep working. Break the cycle, and you face temporary discomfort. Stay in it, and you face permanent control. Break in. Free begins with recognizing the mechanics of the trap. It means questioning whether you truly need what you've been told you can't live without. It means building skills and income streams that are not tied to a single employer. It means seeing debt not as a tool, but as a chain. Corporations will never encourage this kind of independence, because your dependence is their profit. They will tell you that convenience is freedom, that flexibility is empowerment, that their product is the solution to your problem. But the truth is far darker. The problem is often engineered so they can sell you the cure. Once you see this clearly, the glamour fades, the brand loses its magic, the chain becomes visible. And when you finally decide to step outside the cycle, even if it's uncomfortable at first, you'll discover something corporations fear most: that you never needed them as much as they needed you. Because true freedom doesn't come from what you own, or even what you earn. It comes from what you no longer have to rely on. From the moment you can hold a pencil, the training begins. But it isn't the kind of training that teaches you how to live freely. It's training designed to mold you into a cog that fits neatly into the machinery of society. We call it education, but for many, it functions more like indoctrination. The structure of school mirrors the structure of the workplace. Fixed schedules, permission to speak, tasks assigned from above, rewards for obedience, and punishments for deviation. It's less about cultivating original thought, and more about conditioning you to follow orders, meet deadlines, and measure your worth by grades, numbers assigned by authority figures. This is not accidental. The modern public education system was largely shaped during the Industrial Revolution. When governments and industrialists needed disciplined, punctual, and compliant workers to operate factories, children were taught just enough literacy and numeracy to function in a job, but not enough to question the nature of the job itself. Creativity was treated as a distraction. Critical thinking was dangerous. Think about the subjects emphasized versus the ones neglected. You were taught trigonometry, but not how taxes work. You studied ancient kings, but not how modern power manipulates you. You memorized the periodic table, but never learned the psychology of persuasion, the basics of negotiation, or the principles of financial independence. The system didn't forget to teach these things. It avoided them because an educated population, in the truest sense of population, fluent in how money works, how propaganda operates, how systems control, is far harder to manipulate. The trap begins with subtle lessons. You learn that authority is not to be questioned, that there's one right answer, and it's the one in the textbook, that your value is determined by how well you meet expectations, not by the originality of your ideas. These lessons, repeated over a decade or more, create mental habits that persist into adulthood. By the time you graduate, you're primed to step into the same kind of hierarchical control. Lonely, now it's called a career, but perhaps the most devastating design feature of the education trap is debt. In many countries, higher education is sold as the only path to a respectable life. Parents and teachers repeat the mantra: go to college, get a degree, get a good job. What they don't mention is that this good job will often take decades just to pay off the cusp of the degree that qualified you for it. Student loans are not simply financial burdens. They are control mechanisms. They dictate your choices for years, sometimes decades even, for those without crushing student debt. The opportunity cost is enormous. You spend your most creative and energetic years memorizing standardized material instead of experimenting, building, or exploring your natural curiosities. The system teaches you to seek permission for every new venture. It tells you that failure is bad, that taking risks is reckless, that the safest path is the one already paved. And just as schools condition you to accept authority, they also condition you to accept monotony. You learn to sit still for hours, to endure boredom without protest, to see your passions as hobbies rather than pursuits worth structuring your life around. This makes it far easier to accept the dull repetition of a job you dislike, because you've been rehearsing that compliance since childhood. The irony is that real education, the kind that empowers you to think independently, to solve problems creatively, to resist manipulation, is often found outside formal schooling. It's in the books you choose to read, the projects you attempt on your own, the failures you learn from without a teacher telling you how to proceed. But the system doesn't reward these things. In fact, it often punishes them. By the time you enter the workforce, the trap has already done its job. You are trained to trade your time for money, to seek validation from authority, and to fear the uncertainty of independence. You are less likely to question whether the system itself is worth participating in, because you've been taught that it is the only system. Escaping the education trap requires unlearning much of what you were taught to believe about success. It means recognizing that credentials are not the same as competence, that a degree is not the same as an education, and that the ability to think is far more valuable than the ability to memorize it. Also means taking your learning back into your own hands, reading widely, seeking mentors, experimenting without fear of failure. It means asking dangerous questions. Who benefits from the things I was taught to believe? Who loses if I think for myself? Because the truth is, the education system as it stands was never built to set you free. It was built to prepare you for the next trap, and the sooner you see it for what it is, the sooner you can begin building an education of your own, one that teaches you not just how to make a living, but how to live once. Power was held by those who controlled land then. It shifted to those who controlled industry today. Power belongs to those who control information, and make no mistake, information is not simply about facts. It's about perception, narrative, and the subtle shaping of what people believe to be true. Media is no longer just a neutral channel that delivers news. It is the air you breathe, the water you drink, an omnipresent force that defines the boundaries of reality. and in a world saturated with content. It's not the most accurate voice that wins, but the most persistent, the most emotionally charged, and the most manipulative. The modern media ecosystem is built on one central principle. Attention is currency. Platforms and networks don't survive by telling you the truth, they survive by keeping you engaged. Outrage is more engaging than nuance. Fear spreads faster than facts. Scandal captures more clicks than reasoned debate. The result is an environment engineered not to inform you, but to keep you addicted. Think about the average person's media diet. Dozens of headlines flash by in a single scroll. Short videos designed to hijack your dopamine system, flood your feed. Each piece of content is a microdose of stimulation, quick to truly analyze, but potent enough to shape emotion and opinion in this realm. You're not being asked to think deeply, being trained to react instantly. Psychological impact is profound. Media acts like a filter on reality, selectively highlighting certain events, framing them in certain ways, and omitting others entirely. What you don't see matters just as much as what you do. The goal is not to make you believe everything you hear. It's to create a world in which the only truths you consider are the ones handed to you. And here's the insidious part. This isn't just about fake news or obvious propaganda. The most effective manipulation happens through framing facts in a context that leads you to a specific conclusion without you realizing it. A headline can tell the truth and still deceive. A photograph can be real but placed beside another in a way that tells an entirely different story. Media has also mastered the art of manufacturing consensus. If every channel, every article, every influencer seems to be saying the same thing, the human brain, wired for social conformity, assumes it must be true. Few stop to ask, who decided what's worth covering? Who benefits from this story being told in this way? In the past, propaganda was the domain of governments and powerful elites. Today, it's crowdsourced. Anyone with a large following can set the narrative for millions. And while this may seem like decentralization, it's often just another layer of control, because those platforms still decide which voices get amplified, which get buried, and which get erased entirely. Then there's the personal dimension. Social media, in particular, has transformed you into both consumer and product. Your attention is sold to advertisers, but your data is sold to anyone who can pay. Every click, every pause, every word you type is recorded, analyzed, and fed back into an algorithm designed to predict and influence your next move. The result: you live in a personalized media bubble. The news you see is not the news everyone else sees. Your feed is tailored to confirm your existing beliefs, to keep you comfortable, and to keep you engaged. This is not just convenience, it's dangerous. Because when reality is filtered through algorithms, truth becomes fragmented. And when truth is fragmented, society itself fractures over time. The media becomes less of a mirror and more of a puppeteer. It doesn't just reflect reality, it constructs it. Wars are fought, not just on battlefields, but in headlines. Political movements are won or lost, not just through policy, but through perception. Entire populations can be steered toward outrage, compliance, or apathy without ever realizing they've been guided. Escaping this trap doesn't mean cutting yourself off from information. It means reclaiming your ability to think beyond it. It means questioning the source, following the money, and recognizing the emotional hooks designed to bypass your rational mind. It means deliberately seeking out perspectives you disagree with, not because you want to be convinced, but because you refuse to live in a bubble. The greatest lie the media tells is not in the stories it invents, it's in convincing you that you are fully informed when you are, in fact, being selectively fed. And once you see that, you begin to understand the depth of the control. Because in the modern world, the new master doesn't need to chain your body or control your workplace. All they need to do is control the stories you hear, the images you see, and the framework in which you understand the world. If they own your attention, they own your mind. And if they own your mind, they own you. In every era, power has been tied to the medium of exchange. The way people trade value in the ancient world, it was grain, gold, and cattle. In the industrial age, it was physical currency, backed by precious metals. Today, It's digital numbers on a screen currency that most people never even touch, yet spend their entire lives chasing. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Money is not just a tool for trade, it's a tool for control, and the modern financial system is designed so that control flows upward, from the many to the few. Think about debt. Most people believe debt is a personal failing, a sign that they've spent beyond their means, but in reality, debt is the foundation of the modern economy. Governments run on it, corporations thrive on it, and individuals are subtly trained from youth to accept it as a normal part of life's student loans, car payments, mortgages. These aren't just financial products, they're shackles with smiling faces. They keep you working, keep you compliant, and keep you too busy to question the system that put you there. Then there's inflation, a quiet thief that erodes the value of your money without ever taking a single coin from your hand. You don't feel it in the moment, but year after year, what you can buy with your hard-earned income shrinks. You work harder, but get less, and while you're distracted by rising prices at the grocery store, the very institutions responsible for creating inflation tell you it's just a natural part of economic progress. Control doesn't always come from taking it, often comes from offering. Governments and banks offer credit, subsidies, and benefits on the surface. These seem like gifts, but every gift comes with terms, and those terms are rarely in your favor. The one who holds the purse strings can always dictate the rules. Money also serves as a filter, deciding who gets access to opportunity and who doesn't. Education, healthcare, legal defense are rationed based on financial capacity. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. Wealth buys better access, which produces more wealth. Poverty limits access, which deepens poverty. The system doesn't just produce inequality, it relies on it, while the average person fights to save. The financial elite play by a different set of rules entirely. They don't keep their wealth in savings accounts. They keep it in assets that grow faster than inflation. They leverage debt not to survive, but to acquire. They use the tax code not as a burden, but as a strategy. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a feature of the system. Evan, the very nature of money has changed in a way that benefits those in control. Once, currency was tied to tangible value, silver, physical resources. Today, it's fiat money, backed by nothing but trust in the institutions that issue it. That trust can be and has been manipulated, and as money goes digital, the potential for surveillance grows. Every transaction is recorded, every purchase is a data point in the wrong hands. Your financial life can be used as leverage, coercion, or punishment. The ultimate form of control is not simply making you poor, it's making you dependent, and dependency is the quiet killer of freedom. When your paycheck comes from one source, you learn not to question that source. When your benefits rely on compliance, you learn not to resist. The system doesn't need to lock you in a cage. It just needs to make sure you never learn how to live outside it. There is a reason financial literacy is rarely taught in depth. In public education, there is a reason people are encouraged to work for wages rather than build assets. There is a reason debt is normalized, and saving is mocked as old-fashioned. A population that understands money is harder to control. A population that doesn't will willingly trade its time, freedom, and future for a direct deposit every 2 weeks. In the end, money is not just currency, is the oxygen of modern life. Those who control its flow control who breathes easy and who supplicates. And if you've never questioned where your money comes from, where it goes, and why it works the way it does, you've already surrendered part of your freedom. The system thrives because it is invisible like water to a fish. It surrounds us so completely that we forget it's even there to break free. The first step is awareness, but awareness alone is not enough. You can see the bars of the cage and still choose to stay inside. Breaking the cycle requires something harder, shift in mindset so profound that it changes the way you move through the world. The first lie to dismantle is the belief that your value is tied to your job title or income. This idea is the root of the modern economic trap. When your sense of worth is measured in how much you earn, you will always chase more at the expense of your time, health, And relationships, this is by design. A society obsessed with status and consumption will endlessly feed the very system that keeps it bound true. Wealth is not just about money, it's about autonomy. Autonomy is the ability to decide how to spend your time without financial fear dictating your choices. The system teaches you to trade time for money. Breaking the cycle means learning to make money work for you. This doesn't happen overnight, but every step toward it is a step away from dependence. Start with skills. Skills are the currency that can't be inflated away or stolen through policy changes. A skill that solves problems, creates value, or produces something tangible is a form of leverage that no employer or institution can fully control. When you develop a skill set that can be applied independently, whether in a trade, art, business, or digital craft, you weaken the systems. Hold on. You next. Understand assets versus liabilities. The average person spends most of their income on liabilities, things that lose value and produce nothing in return. Cars, gadgets, clothing, entertainment, these keep you in the cycle. Assets, on the other hand, generate income or appreciate over time. Real estate, businesses, intellectual property, investments. The wealthy acquire assets first, then use the income from those assets to buy luxuries. The poor and middle class do the opposite. Debt, when used intentionally, can be a tool when used carelessly. It is a trap. The system wants you to believe all debt is the same. But there is a difference between debt that consumes you and debt that builds you. Debt that funds an appreciating asset or business can be leveraged for growth. Debt for consumption is quicksand. It pulls you deeper the more you struggle. But breaking the cycle is not purely financial, it is psychological. The system thrives on conformity, and conformity thrives on fear. Fear of standing out, fear of failure, fear of scarcity. To escape, you must embrace the possibility of failure as the price of freedom. You must accept that comfort is often the velvet glove covering the iron fist. Minimalism is one of the quietest yet most radical forms of rebellion. When you reduce your needs, you reduce the system's leverage over you. If you can live well on less, you can take risks others can't. You can quit a toxic job, pursue a passion project, or walk away from manipulative arrangements without the terror of losing everything. This is not about deprivation, it's about control. Every unnecessary thing you cut is one less chain. And then there is community. The lone wolf story is romantic, but in reality, systems are defeated by networks. A network of like-minded individuals can share resources, knowledge, and opportunities. They can trade skills without relying on the corporate market. They can resist narratives more effectively than any individual shouting into the void. Independence is powerful, but interdependence on your own terms is even stronger. Information is another battleground the system controls. Perception by controlling the flow of information. To break the cycle, you must become your own filter. Learn to question sources, follow the money behind the message, and seek multiple perspectives before forming an opinion. This mental habit will keep you from being herded into decisions that serve others at your expense. There is the hardest step, taking action before you feel ready. The perfect plan does not exist. Waiting for certainty is a delay tactic. The system counts on every small steps: starting a side business, learning a new skill, saving your first $1,000, reading one more book. Your roads, the foundation of your dependence. Momentum builds in increments. The truth is, breaking the cycle is not an event, it is a lifelong process. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and periods where it feels like nothing is changing, but each act of reclaiming your time, your resources, and your choices chips away at the invisible walls. Over time, you realize the prison was never locked. The key was always in your hand. The question was whether you were willing to use it. Once you step outside, you begin to see the system for what it truly is, not an unbreakable monolith, but a structure held together by the compliance of those inside it. When enough people refuse to play by its rules, the rules change. That is the ultimate secret the system hopes you never discover, because the moment you break the cycle, you are no longer a subject of control, you become a threat to it.